back to the Real Estate Reserve podcast. Jason Bale from Hardin May Bankers, Ian Horowitz from Equity Warehouse. Thanks for tuning in today. If this is your first time hopping on the show, thanks. Thanks. We're going to keep this interesting. We like to bring in some really good guests. This one has a very unique business model. In the land space. I'm curious to dive in and talk to Eugene, who we're going to introduce here in a second. If you're a return viewer, follower, listener, watcher, thanks again for all your support. Certainly couldn't do it without you. Ian and I are just regular guys trying to do regular real estate deals and interview some of the best investors, developers, entrepreneurs throughout the country, and try to get in their heads a little bit and see kind of what they're up to, and learn from them, and that helps represent this show.
Yeah, no, I'm excited too. What I'm not excited for is, since I got this new desk and new camera angle, is how disgusting my desk looks in this shot. I haven't realized that. But anyway, enough about me. Guys, you're getting value out of this show. We're bringing a real guest, doing real deals. The best compliment we can give them is by sharing the show. We don't care about the likes or subscribes, but we do care about the shares, because it's the best compliment we can give our guests. Jason and I could ramble on for hours, but our guest doesn't have hours because he's got to get back to work and grind out some deals. So let's bring in Eugene Gershman from GIS Companies. What's up, brother? How you doing?
Hey guys, good being here. Thanks for having me on the show. It's exciting. We're going to have a fun conversation.
Yeah, I think you're the first. Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, but is this our first guest from Washington State? I think it is. I would have to go out on a limb. So
the other Washington, coast to coast.
Yeah, all right, that's right. Yeah, coast to coast.
So Eugene, you just want to give us a quick little background about what you guys do, and we'll dive a little bit deeper into it here in a second.
Yeah, absolutely. So Eugene Gershman, GIS Companies, we're full service development firm based out of state of Washington, Bellevue, Washington here, and we have this unique niche where the deals that we do are all partnership deals. So we help property owners get their lots developed, whether it's a tear down, whether it's a brand new construction, single family, multifamily, townhomes. That is our niche. And we've been doing it for I've been doing it for about a little over 20 years. Joined my father, who was a contractor, a commercial contractor, who's been doing that before that for another 15 or 20 years. And so it's truly family owned business, and it's been fun ride. Especially the last couple of years has been really exciting.
So
good.
So walk us through kind of how the structures work, or how the process works. So in essence, you're finding landowners, and instead of purchasing properties from them, like traditional real estate investors would do, you're doing some partnerships with them and helping them develop the land for a profit share. Will you walk us through kind of how that process works a little bit?
Right. So the way the deal works is, whenever there is a property to be developed, a lot of times owners, without a lot of experience, they either want to sell, get rid of it, or they have these ambitions that they think their property is a perfect development site. So they start figuring out, well, what am I going to do? And if they don't have a ton of experience, a lot of them call the architect, and or they call a friend who's a contractor who refers them to an architect. And they say, hey, I want to build a house, or I want to build a townhome community, or maybe an apartment building. And that's when it becomes difficult, because the process is really complex. So when we get involved, is we say, this is great. We can help you. We can structure the deal together. We'll bring the right team members. We can work with your architect if they're a good fit, with your contractor if they're a good fit. We help them evaluate the team. And then most importantly, we help them get the financing, because not experienced or less experienced developers, they struggle with that component. They can get through the consultants and through the municipality with enough help, but financing is difficult, because, as you know, every developer needs to have experience before they can qualify for a loan. So that's when we come in, and we strike this partnership where they become either a silent partner. Sometimes they want to be active. Sometimes they want to be involved and they want to learn the process. We don't mind at all. But we strike a partnership where we bring our expertise. We invest some of our fees in the project, and we get an equity stake for that. And we go forward with that.
That's literally what we're dealing with right now, looking at a new build. We've had a lot of experience doing, storage and other commercial assets. And here we are trying to build a 80,000 square foot flex site. And they said, well, you haven't done any spec builds. And we would love to finance you. We'll give you really advantageous financing as a partnership agreement, but we can't do it because you've never done a spec deal. And I would agree. Most people can get through, but then they get to this point. Are you doing deals nationwide? Or are you doing them local to you? What does that look like from your end?
That's a good question. So we started out by mostly focusing on deals around our area, around the greater Seattle, Western Washington is the way we would describe them. And then before COVID, we said, it's time to diversify. Let's look for opportunities elsewhere. We started looking, and then COVID hits. So we contracted, then interest rates spike up, but we contracted more, and we got focused again on our area. But interestingly enough, because I've always been open to going outside of the area and exploring deals wherever they may be, I just put up an LOI for a development in Idaho. I'm talking with another owner about a development in California. We recently had an opportunity to look at the deal in Oregon, so kind of up and down the West Coast. And now I can honestly say that, no, we're not just local. We would look at deals elsewhere.
Yeah.
So is the hard part, Ian, on what you had that, Eugene brings to the table is the development experience for some of these for some of these landowners where no matter what, like they need financing so it's the know-how and then it's also the financing. Because I think I'm guessing, Ian, you probably have the know-how to build.
Well, we have the know-how and the financing ability. The problem is they're like, well, you've never done a spec build, right? And so they've kind of like cut us off here, right? Like me and you both know that construction's our strong suit and we've navigated how to finance deals, but then they're like, well, wait a second, you've never brought anything up out of the ground. And I'd like to ask Eugene and push it back onto him. Is that like a commonality of like where you find a place to insert yourself in this exact situation? Or are you getting involved earlier or later in the process?
The hardest part is actually the experience. And it's interesting the way you ask the question, because a lot of times our phone rings when folks are struggling with financing. But as we start digging in, as we start reviewing the plans and going through the process and estimating and make sure that everything's done right, we start finding mistakes that have been made along the way. And that only comes from experience, because when the team, say design and engineering team, delivers you a set of plans, you look at them and you're like, okay, good enough for me. Submit it to the city gives you the permit, and then you go to work. And then in the field, you start finding out a bunch of things that were overlooked because they weren't required for the permit. Or we've had cases where the permit review missed something, architects missed something, and engineers missed something. Contractors in the field missed it, and then it got caught by the inspector. We had a project where a major ADA issue got caught at the final inspection of this townhome development that we did. It's literally everything's done, finishes, beautiful, ready to hit the market. I think, that project was already actually pre-sold. And the inspector walks through and he says, this master bedroom does not have a window big enough for egress. We're like, what do you mean? He's like, no, I can't sign off on this because that window that you have, it's an operable window, but it's too high off the floor. We're like, no, it's impossible. The architect is a licensed architect. They knew what they were doing. The permit review in the city went through it. They passed it. The window supplier, who usually checks on the windows and egress from every room that needs to have egress, missed it. The contractor missed it. Everybody missed it. We're in the final inspection. You can't, what are we supposed to do? He's like, I don't care. It doesn't meet the code. Fix it.
Hey, dude, I have so many stories. We could probably go on and on, but it's nobody wants to take the responsibility. And then you as a developer, right? And flippers, like we have a lot of house flippers or guys that take houses and turn them into rentals and then refinance them out. Like we have a lot of guys that listen to this show. You're the one caught holding the baggage, right? Like you're paying the interest every day. It costs you thousands of dollars to hold this property, and you've gone through all these processes, and then you get to the end, and they're like, "Sorry, dude, this is wrong." And it's like, "Oh my god, dude! Like like, why didn't you catch this on the rough ends? You were here looking at everything else, sir. Like, how now is today that you decide to get a hair up your ass and deal with this problem?" So, like, what do you do? Like, for you, what do you do in this situation? I usually just snap, flip out, whine, cry, and then we end up paying and fixing the damn thing. What's your go-to to resolve that issue?
That's precisely the recipe. So first you snap, then you yell at everybody, then you pick up the phone and call every single person who fucked up along the way, and then you're like, all right, how are we going to fix it?
Yeah,
Because ultimately you have to fix it. I mean, you consider maybe shooting the inspector.
yeah, I get it, man. We're back
on a
baby.
deal. On a deal that complex, is there stuff like that happens every time, every deal?
Oh yeah, stuff like that happens all the time. But it's the experience, going back to your original question, it's the experience that's going to help you minimize those things. And so what we started doing after that, I mean, on our last project, the architect missed a whole bunch of ADA requirements. And literally everything passed. We're building the building. Luckily, that got caught during framing inspection. But the inspector comes in, starts measuring distances from the toilet to the door in the bathrooms, from like sinks, and he's like, "This doesn't clear because it's a type type A, type B ADA, so it needed to have certain clearances. It got missed. We ended up hiring our own ADA consultant to review the plans and make tweaks. Lost probably a couple months of time because it needed to be first redesigned, then re-reviewed, then reframed, then re-inspected. But so after that, what we started doing is we hired our own in-house designer, and we have him go through all of the plans, even though it's already been coordinated by the architect. And it doesn't matter how experienced the architect is. People make mistakes. They're all human. And they could have built thousands of projects before, but then they screwed up here or missed something. And so just having another set of eyes look at the plans before they go out in the field was our solution.
Yeah, no, that's smart. I mean, I know for us, finding layout designers on Fiverr or Upwork are relatively easy. You can actually get some people that are understudies in architect offices that they'll do floor plans for you, and they can still get them stamped. I think there's a lot of good, unique options that you don't have to go the traditional route to do that. And that's actually like a really smart quality control idea to put somebody in place. And I guess if you're doing enough deals, like, you have to do that. Now, I know you said earlier in the conversation, your dad was a builder. Obviously his opinion of what happens in the field versus what's on paper are two different things. You guys ever end up in a I don't want to say a fight, but you know what I mean? I can imagine your dad being like, "This is stupid. I can't believe we have to do all this." But then there it is in paper and code. How's that been navigating that, dynamic to make sure that things are still being done up to code, but not having to spend, I don't want to say if you followed every code, but some of these codes are getting more and more expensive to develop properties. Like, there's still smart ways to do things in the field. I guess that's the experience that your dad brings to the table.
So the biggest advice I've ever gotten from my father, and I haven't listened to him. I haven't listened to him for probably 15 years because I thought that I was smarter than that. But the most important advice from my dad was, do not cut corners when it comes to architecture and design. It's like, if you cut corners during architecture and design, you're going to pay 10 times more in the field. And I used to think, oh, I'm not going to pay this architect the stupid fee that they just named. I can do it for a quarter of that. And then I would have a casual conversation with him, and he'd be like, "You're a fucking idiot. Stop doing that. You are going to pay for it. You can't avoid that." So that was the biggest advice. And since then, well, in the last probably 5-7 years, I said, you know what? We are going to pay the architect whatever they want. We're going to, of course, make sure that they've done this before. That's the number one thing. If your architect specializes or your designer specializes in one specific thing, and your project is a little bit different, and they say, oh yeah, I can do that. I've done something similar before, or I've got somebody else on my team, or I could outsource this component to somebody else. Think twice. talk to somebody else. Make sure that they've done this particular type of design before, project before, because that experience is important. And most importantly, do not cut scope out of their work. Because look, we had a partner a few years ago. He comes in and we ended up actually partnering. We paid dearly for it, but we ended up partnering on a multifamily project. It was in a beautiful new construction apartment building. And he was bragging about how little he paid the architect. He's like, dude, because, typical fee range for a big project like that is, I don't know, 6 to 8% of the construction costs would go towards architecture engineering. Sometimes it go up higher than that. He comes in and he says, I got this amazing deal. I only paid $300,000. And I'm like, dude, that's like a third of what I would expect. He's like, no, I got this perfect set of plans. Look, it's all approved. The city gave me approval. It's all great. It was probably one of the worst set of plans that we worked with. And when I pushed the architect, I'm like, look, it's incomplete. He goes, well, what do you want me to do? They squeezed you on price. And so I gave him what they bought. The client thought that he was happy because but he bought plans that couldn't be built off of. And then we ended up spending so much more time in design fees, because what happens is your contractor, when they get to a page that doesn't have all the answers, they write what's called an RFI, request for information. On that project, we had something like 300 RFIs in the first, and even still, we were pouring the columns of the podium, the building's podium, and everything was done. Inspector comes in, he says, you guys are missing a column. And then we had our own construction team working on that. They're like, what do you mean? Look at the plans. We're fine. Call up the concrete sub. Concrete sub brings in the structural plans. They're like, look, we built per plan. And the inspector goes, look, there's a row of columns every, I forget, 15, 20 feet. There's no column here. He's like, it looks weird. Write up an RFI, send it to the architect. He sends it to the engineer. Engineer comes back and says, oops.
So I'm sure you got a million stories like that. So question, what type of deals, size, projects, asset class do you prefer? Do you like small multifamily, big multifamily? I mean, like what's kind of, in a perfect world, bread and butter, like, hey, I'd like to just bang out these exact types of deals all day long.
Favorite asset class? It's interesting because there is a favorite from the fun standpoint. I love building custom homes. I love single family deals because I feel like I can relate to them better. I can make them just a little bit better than the average, and I could deliver just a tiny bit better of a product that would have the greater success. They are a pain in the butt, though. The favorite from just business profit standpoint, sort of impact on the society, I would say multifamily, apartment buildings and condos. Those are the favorite from just business growth and impact standpoint. I love little
size ones. How big, like just square footage wise?
So we've reviewed several different apartment buildings, and we found that if it's below, at least in our area, if it's anything below 150 units, it usually does not pencil. Yep, and so there's this interesting kind of dichotomy. There are boutique developers and builders that try to focus on really small projects of up to 50 units. And then there's stuff that's, mega projects, 300, 500, 700 units or more, I suppose. For us, we grew to the point where small projects didn't make sense because they would not cover the overhead. Yep. We found that we have to have the team in place. And for us to have that team in place, the overhead was such that small project simply didn't make sense. if you're a guy working out of a truck, managing your own crew, I suppose that could be done. And I mean, they're done all the time. We haven't been able to make them work. So I would say the most impactful and the most preferred from the business standpoint is 150 to 300 units, apartments or condos. Condos are their own animal, but that would be the niche that I would focus most of my time on.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I would also agree with that. Operationally, right? Like it's a two-way street. Because do you know offhand? I mean, I don't know the last time you built a multifamily, but like, where are you at price per unit? You think to develop a new multifamily property, and what's the equivalent rent, right?
Right. Well, I mean, it's different for different regions of the country,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
I mostly know costs around here,
Yeah.
and in terms of cost per unit, probably in the 300,000 range, 250 to 300. Again,
And you're getting
depending on the
$2,500 to $3,000 rent ish.
Well, yes and no. Again, downtown Seattle, downtown Bellevue, these are high rent places. We could get up to, I mean, some units we can get up to $5 a foot in rent. So for your 2,000 would buy you maybe a tiny one bedroom or a big studio.
Right.
But suburban markets, new construction, yeah, I mean, $2,000 is probably a one bedroom, like decent sized one bedroom or smaller 2 bedroom.
Yeah. Yeah. Do we see the same stuff out here? The pricing delta to what it costs to build to what the in-place rents are. Some of the markets just can't sustain it anymore, especially, where I operated for a long time in Baltimore. It's basically a bedroom community to DC, and Jason's doing loans down in DC for $1 million condos. And, we're up here and guys are struggling to pay $600 rent, and it's only 45 minutes away. But then these developers come in and just try to blow out these gigantic developments of multifamily. They saturate the market. And I'm like, I don't understand how you guys survive or who's even paying these rates. So, I've always been intrigued by, the multifamily, because you build 150 units. It's 150 kitchens. It's 150 bathrooms. Like, there's a lot of cost that goes into those units that I don't think people realize how much. You think 1,000 square foot unit or a 700 square foot unit, it'd be so cheap to build, but in reality, it's not, because there's so much that goes into these apartment units.
Well, and the shocking size of new construction is that in the last 2 years, nothing has been done. I mean, there's been literally no new construction starts in the last 2 years, and we're not expecting any this year. Well, maybe a little bit. The only thing that's being started right now is some sort of a subsidized housing. They call them affordable. I call them subsidized. But that's really the only thing that pencils, because construction costs have shot up so high that rents aren't catching up. On the condo side, same thing. Mortgages are so much higher. People are still having the hangover of the 3% mortgage, that when they're hit with 6.5%, 7% mortgage, they're like, forget it.
Yep.
So we actually, speaking of the new construction, new development, we just published a white paper because we were trying to figure out what are we going to do. We haven't started a new project in the last couple of years. And the only thing that we determined that's going to pencil is micro housing, because cost per square foot is high, rents per square foot are high, but people can't afford them. So the only way to make them afford them without taking government subsidies is to make the unit smaller. And so now we're proposing a project of 200, 250 square foot studios that could rent for, I don't know, $1,500. But there's nothing. It's expensive, right? But there's nothing out there in the market. And so that's the type of housing. We're also looking at state of Washington right now. A couple of years ago, they passed a new regulation to basically force all of the municipalities to approve accessory dwelling units, ADUs. Yep. And so slowly different cities are adopting those regulations. I believe everyone's supposed to adopt it by midsummer this year. And so they would allow ADUs to be built, up to 2 ADUs on each single family lot. So that's another niche that we're exploring, is to increase density and just build these tiny homes that people can afford.
That's a nationwide thing.
I know a lot of states and municipalities across the country are doing that and slowly adopting it. I know that Washington just recently passed it. I think similar ordinances exist in California and Oregon, but I don't know about all the other regions.
Well, no, it's because there's states that we lend in that's very common, and there's some that are not. Is that so? So when they're passing these things, that's just going to be by right. You can have one or two, or is there any other things that have to be taken into consideration? Do you know?
There are lots of things. There are lots of things that need to be taken in consideration.
Obviously,
most
size.
importantly, well, so interesting example. There's this high-end neighborhood here. It's actually a city called Medina, where all the billionaires live, like Bill Gates and Bezos used to have a house there, and all the tech billionaires in the area, they have homes there on the lake. So when this ordinance passed by the state that forces every city to allow these ADUs, all of a sudden, all of these millionaires and billionaires said, we don't want these cheap little things built in our neighborhoods. But so the workaround that the city came up with is they said, oh, well, we don't have enough utility capacity. So we're happy to comply. You can legally build an ADU if you wanted to, but you will need to connect more water, more sewer, and we can't. And so I'm oversimplifying it, but there are ways that cities can push back and create additional restrictions to make it difficult. But yes, in a regular sized city with diverse neighborhoods, it's generally going to be accepted.
Tell us a little bit about your distress asset fund and your GP equity fund that you guys created. Is that kind of a means to just be a little bit more proactive to try to find, deals that are out there that aren't kind of that you can invest in instead of ones that are kind of proactively coming to you? Is your ability to,
right.
to get involved on some of that stuff, and what type of assets are those? What type of asset classes are you trying to invest in with those?
Right. So let me take a step back before I answer that question. So over the last couple of years, new construction wasn't happening. New partnership deals were really hard to find because the economy has been in disarray. Interest rates shut up fast. And we actually lost a project a couple of years ago to foreclosure. So we've been trying to regroup and figure out what to do. I've been hanging out with a lot of syndicators in the last couple of years and learning this whole syndication thing because we haven't done it before. We didn't have a need in raising funds from general public. And so when I discovered this world, I'm like, we got to do something like that. And what came first is after my negative experience of losing a project, I was like, if only I had access to a investment vehicle that would allow me to save it, that would have been wonderful. And so that's where the distressed asset fund, we call it special situations fund idea, came to life. We said, we know enough people, we know enough investors, and we would like to promote it to the world out there because there are these opportunities in the market right now. What happened since the interest rates started going up was a lot of the construction loans have become non-performing loans because folks couldn't refinance them due to higher interest rate. They couldn't get enough money in a refinance to pay off the construction loan. And they couldn't sell the products because nobody would pay enough to even pay off the loan. But unlike 2008, when a lot of lenders immediately started foreclosing and the foreclosure just went through the roof, this time around, many lenders are holding on to the properties. And they're sitting in limbo. They're sitting in receivership situation or in some sort of a frozen state because everybody wants to wait it out and see what's going to happen. And so these are the opportunities that we would like to pursue through receivers in the area, in other areas, not necessarily foreclosure trustees, because those become public, but receivership situations could be very private and easily negotiable. But lenders, is that a word? But lenders are trying to get rid of those assets, right? They don't want them on the books. And we come to the point where it doesn't look like interest rates are going to drop fast. And everybody needs a resolution. So that's where the idea comes from. We put together the fund. We approach the owners that have these brand new projects, and that's specifically the idea behind special situation. We do not call it distressed asset. We call it special situation because while they are financially distressed technically, they're still, it's not the leaky roof, it's not the abandoned rat infested house that we're pursuing. We're pursuing brand new properties. The lenders are willing to get them off the books. The developers are willing to get out to save their butts. And we are trying to create a situation where the original investor still has a say in it. We would offer them what's called a hope note. So they remain as a partner. They already know the property. They know how it's built. They know how it needs to be maintained. The lender gets their money with probably a discount. And the new investors would step in as the primary investor now, looking to capitalize on the growth. And so that's been the concept. We've seen a few properties that would qualify for something like this. We just announced that, so it's literally brand new. But the feedback has been great so far.
Hey man, when there's a gold rush, you want to sell shovels, and that sounds what you're doing, right? There's this impending gloom that a lot of people like to talk about. Jason talks about it literally every time I talk to him. The market's going to go down. We're at the top. We're at the top. We're at the top. Literally, this conversation. Next time you call Jason, I'll let you know the market's at the top, no matter where it's at. But with that being said, there is something to be said. There are people that are getting rate adjustments. There are people that can't perform. They can't lease up. They can't do any of these things. And they're going to be in a situation, and I could see how a product like that's still a good fit. Sounds like a win-win situation where the operator and you guys and the bank, for that matter, all end up in a better positive situation rather than just, I'll wait till it goes to foreclosure. I'll grab it out of receivership. You get screwed. I get the property, and off we go, right? So sounds like you've created more of a win-win situation. So that's exciting to hear.
Yeah, and that's been the idea, is that we call it the ethical approach. Where we would like all the parties to be, nobody's going to be fully satisfied. It's a crappy situation to be in, but at least it offers a solution. It offers investors an opportunity to gain when the market stabilizes, and it offers the original sponsor to still have a chance of recovering, and the lender to get it off their books.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. I mean, definitely seen a lot of good experience here. And I think your experience, the fact that, you mentioned that you went through a foreclosure, that, you have the experience and you can convey that to the borrowers. And I think that's the huge help, and it's good to see that there's good operators out there. You West Coasters are always a little bit nicer than us East Coasters. But I'm glad to see that you're creating win-win situations. Eugene, this has been absolutely awesome. One question we like to ask all our guests before we let them go is, what's one book or podcast that you enjoy or that everybody should know about?
So the podcast that I've been listening to a lot in the last, I would say, few months is Diary of a CEO with Stephen Bartlett. That's been my favorite. There's lots of books. Probably one of my favorite books in the last few years has been Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss.
Yep.
Just a great negotiations book. I listened to the audiobook at least 3 times.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. That's one that most people should probably reread once a year. And The Diary of a CEO, I caught him and Hermosi talking the other day, and I got locked in for all 2.5 hours. I was just like glued to it. It was so
Right.
good. So now he's in my YouTube feed, and I watch that one too. So that's definitely a good one. We'll get all that info in the show notes. Eugene, people want to learn more about what you're doing. They want to get involved with any projects that you have going on. They just want to see what your life is like. Where can they find you on the internet and learn more about what you guys do over at GIS?
Pretty much everywhere on social media. LinkedIn is probably my most visited page. Eugene Gershman, look me up. GIScompanies.co, no M in there. That's our website. And then, Facebook, Instagram. I recently started a TikTok channel. I have like 25 followers there, so I'm super proud of it. But everywhere on social media.
Hey man, you got to do a couple more dancing videos and you'll be at the top in no time. So Eugene, this has been an awesome conversation. We know you're legit because how you handled the window issue. I'm glad to know that I'm not the only one that would handle it that way. And guys, if you got any value out of this, share the show. I can tell you Eugene's legit just by hearing how he talks about the properties. And we don't care about the likes or subscribes, and we'll catch you all on the next one.
Thanks for tuning in to the Real Estate Reserve podcast. Do us a favor and like, comment, and share our broadcast. It helps the algorithm and helps us spread the word too. Till next time, thank you for tuning in.